I'm Alicia Sedgwick, a Monaco public speaking coach, professional MC, and corporate trainer. And I'm delighted to be talking today to a colleague and very dear friend, Gavin Sharpe. Gavin is a UK qualified psychotherapist, relationship therapist, psychosexual therapist, and executive coach. Gavin works with individuals, couples, and companies looking to make profound changes in their relationships and their lives. Gavin is also a certified sex addiction therapist. Like me, previously, Gavin was a lawyer. And unlike me, he was also an entrepreneur in London. Today, he's based full-time in Monaco. We're going to be talking on the subject of lockdown and coming out of lockdown, as opposed to coming out of the closet, which many of you may feel like you are coming out of a closet because you've been in a very small space for a great deal of time. We're going to be looking at the effects of being in confinement and now coming out of confinement. So my first question for you, Gavin, is let's talk about sex. Do you think that we have had less or more sex during lockdown?
I don't know, Alicia, have you had more sex or less sex during lockdown?
No comment.
That's the legal training. It's what it does to us.
That's what it does, yeah.
It's a really interesting question, and we are, I guess, too early to really have hard data, but definitely for lots of us, I think our sex lives have changed and are changing one way or the other. But I don't think when we get the research, we're going to find out that everybody was having hot sex or everybody was having no sex. What we do know is that when we get in touch with our own mortality, or we get what we sometimes call death anxiety. For some of us, we eroticize our feelings, we sexualize our feelings. So some of us find that we are more turned on when we can sense our mortality. And for other people, it has the opposite effect. So when the numbers come out, I would expect to see probably an even split. I realize I probably sat on the fence, but I think it really is going to be mixed.
Well, you know, whatever to on the spot. Do you think that there's been more romance?
Actually, I think there probably has been more romance because if I think about some of the stories that clients have shared, and I think we have kind of caught on to this idea of date night, and so many clients have shared stories where they have, you know, not just said, you know, well, tonight's date night, but actually they've got dressed, they've chosen their meal as if they were going to go to a restaurant, and have actually made a real effort. So I think once we were past this shock of being, if we're in a relationship, stuck inside with our loved ones, then all these ideas started going around about virtual dinner parties and date night. So I think for couples, yes, some have had more romance. But I tell you what's really interesting when you look at the stats, and I don't know if you put this under romance, but the usage of porn has spiked since confinement. And one of the companies or one of the industries that's really benefiting from this are the people who are making sex toys. So if I go back to your question, I made an assumption, which as a psychosexual therapist is not a great assumption. Are we having more sex with other people? But there's also this sense of, you know, either if we're in a relationship or if we're single, are we finding more pleasure with ourselves and with our own bodies and in our own privacy of confinement? So, you know, the topic of sex is a really interesting one in confinement.
It's an interesting topic whether you're in confinement or not. And actually my glasses are steaming up. So, so have you got Zoom fatigue from all of that Zoom sex, or no, from all the therapy online?
It is tough when if you're online, whatever you do, whether it's a therapist and we are looking at the computer all day. So yes, I have found that I need to change the way I work a bit. I have spaced out my time between appointments. I'm quite fortunate some clients don't want the camera on, which kind of almost runs counter to modern day psychotherapy. But if you think about where did psychoanalysis start, it started with Freud and someone who actually wasn't, his patients were on a sofa and very often he was behind them. So it's really fascinating how we've had to adapt. But it is still a struggle because there is this kind of disconnect between mind and body. And one of the things that as a therapist I'm so focused on, actually we all are in communication. I mean, you know this through your work, is the body language. And it's so much harder to pick up the nuances. So yes, I'm more tired probably doing the work on Zoom than I was working with people in real space.
Yes, I found exactly the same. I have to say that in my teaching and training, it really has been exhausting. I suppose because you are focused so much on the screen, but trying to get that human element at the same time. And so you're almost, because you're sort of overcompensating for the fact that you are on a screen and it's not in person. So yeah, I can completely relate to that. Have most of your clients changed to being online with you?
Yes, I think it's, at first there was, I would say, probably about a third of my clients were quite reticent. Well, if it's not going to be the same. And because I've always worked partly online with clients who travel a lot, a lot of my Monaco clients are, their jobs require them to travel. So we'll work online when they are traveling. But for those clients who weren't used to it, there was resistance. And probably now from that third who dropped off, I'd say probably the majority now have come back with one or two exceptions. But I think, we're all resistant to change. I was the same. I mean, I had a session which, after working with a client for several years, it was our final session. If you'd ever said to me, you can end a relationship online, it's like that really bad kind of teenager, you're dumped sort of, it's something wrong with ending a relationship online. But I'd say we had a really moving end to our work together. We both were in the moment, we were both present. And so that was a learning lesson for me.
Yes, I can understand that. So there's a lot of anxiety now. We're moving out of lockdown and we are coming into a different phase. So do you think that there have been any benefits for people and couples during this stage of confinement?
I think yes is the answer to that, because, and I think I hesitated, you kind of saw me take that breath, because it's so hard, isn't it, to separate the tragedy and then there is stuff where, as you say, there have been benefits. And I think that for some of us, if we've been able to treat confinement, and this is going to sound a little absurd, but more like a spiritual retreat, rather than I'm in solitary confinement. And for those of us who have then been able to be more reflective, to be more present, then I think with those of us who've been able to do that have had more aha moments. And I've seen couples who were sort of struggling a little bit beforehand, but have found a way to connect. They've gone on long walks together, and they've been required to connect with themselves and with each other. So I think now, of course, that depends on individual circumstances. If we've got sick, if we've got a sick relative, we won't have had that experience. But I think it is important to talk about, and I'm so glad you asked that question, which is the benefits of confinement. And it will be really interesting, again, when we finally have some research, how many of us will have made life-changing decisions that, again, is this death anxiety. And are we going to wake up and say, you know what, I don't want that job anymore, and I care less about money than I did before because my values have shifted? So I think, you know, we're still in it, but there's a huge amount of reflection. And the last point I'll make on that is, I think that, again, all the shops are closed, and we are, go back to how I answered the question initially, this spiritual retreat. We're being asked to look inside rather than outside for validation. And that's, you know, I can't go to the shops and buy something. I can't go for a nice meal. So I've just had to be with myself and my loved ones. And I think lots of us have been surprised by the connection that's come from that.
Yes, it has been in those ways very, very beneficial, I must admit. You know, to have that time, to take the time, it has been, yeah, you can use it as an opportunity, can't you? Out of adversity comes opportunity. So now that in Europe we are phasing out of lockdown, can you give any advice or help for people dealing with that phase now? Because it is producing a lot of anxiety, because the fact is that the virus is still out there. Anything to help us cope?
I think part of how we might cope is actually through accepting that we're still in this, my feelings are shifting, and I'm going to be gentle with myself. And I can't expect myself, because phase one is over, I can't just assume that, well, my feelings attached to phase one are over. This is a roller coaster. This is an emotional roller coaster, whether you sit in the therapist chair or the interviewer's chair, where we're going through turbulent times. And I think if I could summarize the emotion for us, I think it's grief. I think we all are grieving for what was. You know, we're grieving for the normal life that we had. And what makes it particularly difficult is I've also got anticipatory grief, because I'm also mourning for what might come. Yes. So to go to your question, I need to try and focus on what's real and what's not real. Because when I get caught up in the anticipatory grief, then I think what happens is my negative thoughts kick in. It's going to be a disaster. I will lose my job. You know, relatives will die. And the reality is we don't know any of that. So I think that to summarize, I think number one, I need to accept my feelings and not try and brush them under the carpet. And I need to try and manage the negative thoughts, because there is some stuff here that I can control, and there's a heck of a lot of stuff I can't. And I need to be okay with that.
Well, I think, you know, that you said that we need to be gentle with ourselves. And that brings us right back to where we started, and the sex toys. So ladies and gentlemen listening today, be gentle with yourselves. Gavin, thank you so much. As always, it has been very interesting, very informative, and also very uplifting and supportive. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alicia. Thank you.